Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Crypto Live Leak. We have a special treat for you here today. Again, my name is Ken, and we have our Chief Compliance Officer here, Pat, with us. You can find him on Twitter
at Patrick Conlon 8.
And as always, you can find me on Twitter at Ken Garofalo, and of course at Crypto Live Leak. And today we are providing live voting day coverage for the midterms 2018.
So welcome to Crypto Live Leak. All views expressed by me are entirely my own and do not reflect the business of Crypto Live Leak. So let's get into it. Midterm election coverage 2018. According to CNN and early ballot voting, some 33 million ballots have been cast, projecting this to be the largest voter turnout for a midterm election in some 50 years, certainly significantly more than in 2014. So tonight on the dais, we have 35 Senate seats up for grabs. We have 36 gubernatorial races and all 435 House seats on the ballot. One of the more interesting things about this election is who's not on the ballot, but who most certainly is on the ballot, and that is our president, Donald J. Trump. In the lead up to the midterm elections, Trump made this certainly a referendum on his presidency, and it definitely is. Whether you support him or you are against him, well, I think one of the big reasons for such high voter turnout is exactly people's views on the president and his polarization. So, as we move forward tonight, we're gonna get into it. You have a lot of pundits and polls predicting a blue wave. I think if there's anything we learned from 2016, particularly if you voted for Hillary Clinton, it is that you most certainly can't trust the polls. So we are going to be here all night until most of the races have been called, and there are some very, very interesting ones. So as similar to a general election, I think one of the more interesting races that have been keyed on is certainly the state of Florida. There's a couple of very, very important races happening there, both in the Senate and in the gubernatorial race there, between DeSantis and Andrew Gillum. Gillum looking to become the first African-American governor of the state of Florida. In Georgia as well, we also have an interesting gubernatorial race that is shaping up. So let's get into it. So in Georgia right now with early reporting, it looks like Kemp has an overwhelming lead, but we do only have, as of right now, only 29% of precincts have reported. Looks like one of the reasons for Kemp's lead is that the majority of precincts that have reported seem to be rural. Still waiting for some of the greater urban areas around Atlanta and Columbus and Savannah to report. Let's take a look at Florida as we look at how close DeSantis and Gillum are. So right now we have about 96% of precincts in. It looks like there's a slight edge for DeSantis of about 1% and only less than 100,000 ballots cast. It looks like we're still waiting for some precincts in Miami and Orlando to finish reporting. Jacksonville does not look like has completely reported either, but this is certainly an incredibly close race. Regardless of whether Florida, obviously historically a Republican state, but this has definitely been one of the more interesting races to watch. So, one of the other gubernatorial races that's happening right now is in Ohio. That's Springfield. Whoops, sorry, that is Illinois. And so right now in Ohio, we have about 40% of precincts reporting. We have DeWine leading by about 2%. Over the Republican DeWine leading with about 2% of the vote over the Democrat Cordray. Still early, only about 40%. Polls in there are just closing, or just closed around 7, I believe. So Ohio and Florida, it's typical in any general, as Ohio and Florida go, typically so do the nation. So these are one of the reasons why we are paying such close attention to both Florida and Ohio. There have been some early races called thus far. Obviously, Democrats' main focus has been on the House, since they believe that's their best chance to take back a chamber. Democrats have not controlled the House since the Tea Party revolution in 2010, under President Obama's first term in office. So if the House is able to flip, that would certainly be a significant win for Democrats. It would offer them an ability to be a check on the president, or to just be completely obstructionist to his entire agenda, which is one of the reasons why, to the lead up of this, Trump stressed the importance of him essentially being on the ballot, because it is very much his legislative agenda that is. And I think, despite there were obviously Republicans in more moderate districts were upset that the president chose not to discuss about the health of the economy and the most recent jobs report that came out last Friday. Instead, focusing primarily on issues that cater and are very important to his base, such as immigration and the migrant caravan that's coming through Central America. Immigration, a huge issue for voters. I believe some exit polls suggesting that about a quarter of voters, immigration was the most important issue. Among Democrats, about a quarter of healthcare seems to be the most important issue. And obviously that makes sense to Democrats, as Republicans have tried consistently to repeal the ACA. They did so unsuccessfully in the first 2 years of Hello, welcome to Crypto Live Leak and our midterm election coverage. And if anyone's newly joining us, we are in the midst of covering all of the races tonight. 35 Senate seats, 36 governorships, and all 435 House seats up for grabs. This is the highest voter turnout in a midterm election in some 50 years. Some 33 million early voting ballots were cast, according to CNN, which, I mean, it's quite the contrast from the last midterm election in 2014. Obviously, midterm elections don't have the same voter turnout as general elections do, but this is certainly a very good barometer as far as how people are engaged right now politically. Whether or not you're for our president or against our president is on the ballot tonight. And this, the president chose to largely make this about himself. And to an extent, I don't necessarily blame him, because it is largely about his agenda going forward in the next 2 years. If Democrats are able to take the House back for the first time since 2010, I mean, their first check on his power is or their first primary goal, one would think, would most likely be obstruction. That would certainly seem to be the partisan politics way in which Congress has operated most recently. So let's take a zoom out to our national map right now. We were taking a look, if you're just joining us, we were just taking a look at some of the interesting governor's races that are currently happening. A couple of early races have already been called. We are calling this live from Massachusetts. So in Massachusetts, Governor Baker is expected to win a second term. Only 2% of precincts reporting right now, but Baker is projected to win in a landslide. Another race that's been called in Massachusetts is Senator Elizabeth Warren, has won re-election with over 70% of the vote. Obviously, a lot of people are paying attention to that on the national stage because Warren has made no qualms about her intention to run for president in 2020. So she certainly, in winning re-election, continues to work or to move forward that goal within her own party in the primary. After this election season ends, the next one begins. So hopefully you stay with us and you are just as energized and excited for this as I am. We will be with you all night as the news breaks, as races come, and we are here to answer any and all questions you have. I'd love to take questions. I like to engage across all spectrums, independents, non-party affiliates, parties I've never heard of before. Please, any kind of engagement that we can get, any kind of basic questions you have. Maybe you didn't vote at all. The majority of millennials, 18 to 35, even though we are the largest voting bloc and are the largest demographic in the United States, we vote at incredibly low levels. Such low levels, it's sad. And it's the reason why no one's paying attention. So if you're angry about climate change, if you're angry about student debt, show up to the polls today. Show up. So let's take a look at, for the first time, at some of the most important House races. Again, obviously, the House, the Senate is not expected to flip according to a majority of pundits, although who knows. Republicans there's a lot of tough House races. There's a lot of vulnerable Republicans up. Democrats only need to win 23 of some 80 seats in order to flip the House. A total of 218 needed to control the House. And so that's certainly what Democrats have been focused on more recently, as far as where general fund, campaign fund contributions have been pouring into for late television ads in vulnerable districts, in urban, more moderate Republican districts, and districts that Trump actually won in 2016. So one of the main focuses or some of the main focus for states were purple states that Trump won in 2016, where he was able to carry blue-collar, white, working-class voters. So we're looking at Michigan, we're looking at Wisconsin, we're looking at Pennsylvania, we're looking at Illinois. These are all very important seats and are really kind of the big chance that Democrats have. So a couple of early House seats have already been called. So up in New England, not House. So we have less than 3% in New Hampshire with the Democrat Custer leading. In Vermont, we have Welch, who's already won, the incumbent, winning re-election. House seat 1, we have Pappas leading the Republican Edwards with 19% reporting by some 12.5%. In Massachusetts, in my home state, we have Stephen Neal running unopposed. He's been in Congress for a very long time. The biggest surprise in Massachusetts happened in the Democratic primary. It happened when Ayanna Pressley upset the 20-year incumbent Mike Capuano in the District of Boston. Ayanna becomes the first African-American woman to be elected to Congress from the state of Massachusetts. So congratulations to her. And I think, if anything, as far as even some of the special elections that happened earlier, you go back to the special election in Pittsburgh, you go back to the special election in New Jersey. These were all very hopeful signs for Democrats early. And I think, at least with the election of Ayanna, one of the things that she's talked about is that there may not be any significant difference between her and Capuano's voting record, but she was able to appeal to Massachusetts voters by talking about time for new leadership and a new direction with the party. And this is one of the reasons why I feel like that young voters and Democrats, to a large extent, are energized. Certainly the progressive base is energized in seeing some more progressive candidates start to win ballots. You look at what happened in New York with Cortez winning election. So there are a variety of different seats in progressives who have done well in Democratic primaries, upsetting incumbents and more moderate Democrats that held those seats for quite some time. So we're going to switch back here from the House. We're going to take a look at some of the Senate races that are happening. Some of the earlier polls that ended around 7 and 8 are starting to be called. So if you look at the Senate race in Indiana, for example, it looks like the Republican Braun is going to beat the incumbent Democrat Donnelly, leading by some 13 points with 64% of precincts reporting. In Ohio, it's projected that the incumbent Democrat Brown will retain his seat in the Senate. In West Virginia, we have 57% of precincts reporting, with Manchin, the Democrat, leading the Republican. That's an interesting key race for the Senate. Even though the Democrat was the incumbent, Trump did win West Virginia in 2016, and he has staked a large percentage of a large part of his policy defending coal and against Obama era regulations against clean coal. So let's take a look at one of the more interesting Senate debates. I think it's still too early to call for Texas, although obviously Beto O'Rourke, when I was discussing progressives earlier, is kind of the runaway rock star to a large extent, at least with his national profile. It would be huge. It would be a tremendous upset if Beto O'Rourke were to win the Senate seat in Texas. Texas hasn't elected a Democrat to Congress, Democratic senator to Congress, I believe, since 1988. So that would be a huge, huge shift, particularly given how progressive O'Rourke's platform largely has been in a conservative state. I know nobody really likes Ted Cruz. Nobody likes Ted Cruz. However, it's still Texas, and Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. So, still too early to call there. I think it would be a shocking upset. We have about 55% of precincts reporting in Texas, with Beto about 36,000 votes behind Cruz at the moment, or less than 1%. So we'll be following that one really closely. Another Senate election we're following incredibly closely is in Florida, between former Governor Rick Scott and the incumbent Nelson. So right now it looks like, with about 96% of precincts reporting, that Governor Scott is leading by about some 60,000 votes. That may very well go. We'll see. Hopefully it doesn't go to a recount, or we'll be up on live casting for weeks now. But that one looks like it is coming very soon to being called. North Dakota, the incumbent Heidi Heitkamp, who was probably the most vulnerable Democratic seat. She had to run away from her party to a large extent. She's been, the president's been a very outspoken critic against her and Susan Collins. Welcome new members to our midterm election coverage 2018. Welcome to Crypto Live Leak. My name is Patrick. I will be with you all night. We are covering all of the results as they come in. 35 Senate seats up for grabs, 36 governorships, and all 435 House seats. Pundits are predicting a blue wave. Is that going to happen? I don't know. Democrats haven't had control of the House since 2010, since the Tea Party shift and the conservative wave of 2010. Is this a blue wave, or is this just another instance of voter discontent where voters switch parties? Because that tends to happen. Tends to happen a lot, actually, historically speaking. So if you're just joining us, we were just going over some of the more contested Senate races. We just checked in on the race in Texas between incumbent Senator Ted Cruz and the rock star Democrat Beto O'Rourke. We're looking at Florida between the incumbent Nelson, who's vulnerable to former Governor Rick Scott. We are also looking at the results as they come in Indiana, although that looks like the Republican is going to upset the Democrat Donnelly. And if we were just taking a look in North Dakota at Heidi Heitkamp, the vulnerable Democrat, only about 1% reporting thus far. Very, very early, not many votes. We'll be keeping a key eye on that one. Florida, about 97%. Governor Scott with a very close margin thus far. We'll be paying very close attention to that, with the majority of precincts reporting that should get called very soon. Virginia, Tim Kaine, the incumbent, won fairly handedly by 12 points. Ohio, the incumbent Democrat, won. Pennsylvania, Democrat won overwhelmingly. New York, no surprise there. Massachusetts, my home state, was a landslide for Elizabeth Warren as she continues to try to propel herself into the general election towards 2020. Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont won the landslide, 65, about 30%, 36% reporting thus far, 65% of the vote. I don't think anyone was going to unseat Sanders in Vermont. With Tennessee, we have the Republican Blackburn leading by a healthy margin of about 25 points, 55% of precincts reporting thus far. Missouri is the other very close seat that we're watching, only about 6% reporting thus far. Claire McCaskill was the other vulnerable Democrat that Republicans were targeting. A lot of money coming in late to that race. McCaskill had to run away from her own party to a large extent on this. She went so far as to agree with the president on constructing of the border wall for immigration, breaking largely with her party to satisfy her own constituents. Taking a look now here. Mississippi still too early, only about 4% reporting. Indiana was going to go to Braun. Missouri still too early. Here in Nebraska, we have a close race thus far, only about 11% reporting. We have the Democrat trying to unseat the incumbent Republican Fisher. That looks to be separated by about 3 points. But again, only 11% reporting in. That's still very, very early, way too early to call. In Michigan, we have a close race thus far, about 14% reporting. Republicans looking to unseat the incumbent Democrat Stabenow. That would be quite a win for Republicans if the Republicans are able to flip any Senate seats and add to their majorities in the Senate. That would be a huge, huge win. Obviously, their main concern is to keep their majorities in the Senate, knowing that there are a lot of Republicans that are vulnerable in the House. Again, pundits predicting a blue wave. It still remains to be seen. If you voted Democrat in 2016, you voted for Hillary, then you know all too well how much of a mistake it is to believe the polls. One of the other things we were speaking about earlier that I think has kind of been overplayed, and I wish that it wasn't. I'm a millennial. I hope that many of you are too that are watching this now. But I do believe that the millennial and the youth vote has been overplayed. Even though the millennials 18 to 35 are the largest demographic in the United States, we don't vote.
We don't vote.
We don't vote. If our margins are higher than 15%, I'd be highly shocked. I hope that they are. I wish they were much higher than that. And that's also one of the reasons why we're not represented so well. So if you care about student debt, you care about climate change, you care about gun violence, these are things that poll very highly with the millennial generation, you have to vote. I hope you went out and you voted today. I know I did. So again, still some races have been decided. for the Senate. So we went over the Northeast. A lot of incumbent Democrats obviously kept their seats. Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts. In Vermont, Senator Sanders kept his Senate seat. That's not surprising. In New Jersey's an interesting seat, given that the incumbent Senator Bob Menendez was investigated on corruption charges and later cleared by the FBI. We'll see how vulnerable his seat is among Democrats. Largely, that may flip Republican just because perception of that man is not very good. You just can't be investigated for corruption charges and come out clean. And obviously, I know that's as we move down south to Florida. Let's check in and see. Same, still only at 97%. Florida, it looks like will be called fairly soon between the incumbent Nelson and the challenger, former Governor Rick Scott. That one's still a little too close to call. Hopefully, Florida doesn't end up in another recount. So, as we view, take a look at the Senate seats, let's check in on some of the governor's races at the moment. So, in Georgia, this is one of the most interesting governor's races that's happening. Obviously, the Democrat Abrams seeks to become the first African American and female governor in the state of Georgia. With about 36% in, it looks like she's trailing the Republican Kemp by about 20 points. Kemp, the optics, at least early, didn't look very good. He is the state attorney. He's the state attorney general who is in charge of making sure that the elections are run stable and that there's no perception of kind of wrongdoing, but yet at the same time he's on the ballot. So that certainly does create a little bit of a conflict of interest.
All right, guys, and just to remind you, we are covering election 2018 midterms, and thank you for watching Crypto Live Leak. Don't forget, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment section, and we will do our best to answer them for you. That's the beauty of having a live stream here on YouTube, is we actually get to interact with you guys, the audience. So are you voting Democrat? Are you voting Republican? Do you not care? Would you rather hear us talk about cryptocurrency? Those are all things we want to hear from you guys. How did you find our link? How did you find this here coverage link? So come on, guys, get to that comment section and interact with us. We'd like to hear what you guys are thinking. And we hope that you guys are enjoying the coverage that Patrick is providing here today. Of course, he is a staunch Democrat. You can give him some trouble for that if you'd like.
I'm not a staunch Democrat.
Oh, he says he's not a staunch Democrat.
No, I'm an independent. I do, some of my values certainly are more Democratic leaning. However, I consider myself to be a moderate. I vote for the candidate, or I try my best to vote for the candidate and not the party.
Well, that's a good policy. Myself, the only thing that stood out to me being here from Massachusetts is Elizabeth Warren and Mr. Deal for the Senate race. Back in, I think it was May or earlier this year, there was a hearing with the Back in March with the CFTC and the SEC about cryptocurrency and proposed regulations. Should there be regulations? What's going to happen? What are their opinions? And the members of the Senate were able to ask questions to Giancarlo. What was his name? Giancarlo and the SEC guy as well.
I forget, Jay something. I should know this.
And every senator seemed to have very specific questions, except for Elizabeth Warren. She came out with a question regarding class actions and corporations. Very off topic. There was a lot of scoffing being done by the other senators to her. And
Jay Clayton, Chairman
right.
Jay Clayton.
And that just stuck in my mind. Maybe she was just trying to get a soundbite for a political campaign later in maybe her White House run or whatever. But that's something that stuck in my mind for Elizabeth Warren. So if you guys have any other things like that are in your mind regarding the senator race or the governor race, put it in the comment section. Let's hear about it. Let's discuss it, guys. Come on now.
And welcome back. On that note of our senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, she won handily today. She won by about 70 points. That's not surprising. It is Massachusetts. We are an overwhelmingly Democratic state. We haven't elected a Republican senator since the special election in 2010, and that Scott Brown, that was also kind of running on the wave of conservatism. That was largely about the healthcare vote. Being from Massachusetts, we already had healthcare. One of the arguments against it was that it was going to fudge up our own state system. So Brown kind of, was able to capitalize at a very unique time in catching a conservative wave. He was also going against an incredibly weak Democratic opponent in former Attorney General Martha Coakley, who lost to Scott Brown in the Senate election and then ran for governor. The Democrats had the brilliance of electing her to run after Deval Patrick ended his 2 terms, and then she proceeded to lose by Charlie Baker and since has disappeared into obscurity, thank God. So let's continue with our national coverage. Oh, what I was talking about with Warren. So Warren did win. So one of the interesting things that we'll see with Warren is obviously she has made no qualms about her intention, or at least the perception is that she intends to run for president in 2020. And to a large extent, this is kind of what we're seeing. We're seeing a fight also within the Democratic Party that's happening right now, as far as kind of the Sanders, Warren, progressive base, Betos, Cortez, Ayanas. That seems to be a pretty big difference, or at least seems to be at odds with kind of the establishment Democrats and people that are appealing more moderate. This race has largely been about Democrats trying to, project themselves as the more moderate, conservative candidates willing to work with the president. And again, if you're just joining us, welcome to Crypto Live Leak. Welcome to our midterm 2018 election coverage. We will be here with you all night. Early voting from CNN has some 33 million ballots cast. This is turning out to be the highest voter turnout in some 50 years for midterm elections. Whether or not you're a supporter of our president, and I have a lot of friends who are, or you don't like our president, it's most clear from Donald J. Trump's own words that it is him on the ballot this election season. It is his legislative agenda. So whether you showed up to vote for his policies and candidates that support him, or you are voting for candidates just because you can't stand the man and you will vote for anyone that is willing to obstruct him, it's certainly going to be an interesting night as Democrats look to take back the House and Republicans look to gain on their Senate lead. So on some vulnerable seats where Republicans are looking to flip incumbent Democratic senators, we were just taking a look at that was the governorship. So let's switch back to the Senate. We were taking a look at, here's a vulnerable seat in Missouri, Claire McCaskill, only about 12% reporting thus far. She's the incumbent Democrat from Missouri, where the Republican Hawley is looking to overtake her. Again, only about 12% of her precincts reporting thus far, but it looks like Hawley is leading by some 19 points, which, again, it's still too early to call that significant. However, Missouri, a relatively conservative state. Another vulnerable Democratic Senate seat is in North Dakota with Heidi Heitkamp. Obviously, our president has been very vocal against both Heitkamp, McCaskill, and then another female senator from Maine, Susan Collins. Heitkamp, only about 5% of precincts reporting right now, but it's not looking very good for her. Let's take a look. In Maine, it looks like Angus King, the independent incumbent, is going to win re-election there. Still only about 2% in. Tammy Baldwin, Wisconsin, overwhelmingly only about 1% in Wisconsin. So still a lot of races too early to call. Florida, definitely shaping up to be the closest Senate race right now, with the incumbent Nelson and former Governor Rick Scott. They are about 98% of precincts reporting in Florida right now, and it's a margin of less than 1% from votes cast. We're looking at a difference of well less than 100,000 votes. Let's take a check in in Texas. We have about 70% of precincts reporting. Obviously, this would be really big, and I mean, I can't really underscore how large of a victory it would be for Democrats if Beto were to win in Texas. Texas hasn't elected a Democratic senator since 1988. So I haven't been alive 30 years since the last time that Texas elected a Democratic senator. Right now, with about 70% of precincts reporting, we have O'Rourke leading by about 2 points and a little over 100,000 votes. That one's still way too early to call. Again, that would be a huge upset if not just any Democrat, but somebody who has been, as outspoken, a liberal progressive, largely, in Texas, in a very conservative state, to come out with some of his platforms, that would be quite the upset. I know nobody likes Ted Cruz, but there's a familiar statement amidst the Republican Party, and that is, Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. So that would be a huge upset if Beto were to win. A couple other interesting seats. It looks like Indiana is going to flip. We have 68% of precincts reporting thus far, and it looks like the Republican Braun is going to unseat the incumbent Democrat Donnelly. He has a comfortable marginal lead of about 13 points. He's leading by some 180,000 votes at the moment. Let's take a check-in New Jersey. 33% of precincts reporting, where the incumbent Democrat Bob Menendez, who was investigated and brought up on corruption charges, is looking for re-election. Right now, only about 33% reporting, and Menendez has only a 2-point lead. In Virginia, the incumbent Tim Kaine overwhelmingly won re-election. Pennsylvania, the incumbent Democrat held on to their seat, as well as Maryland. In Ohio, the incumbent Democrat Brown also retained his seat. In Michigan, about 30% reporting. It's still early, it hasn't been called, but it looks like the incumbent Democrat Stabenow will retain his seat. Wisconsin, the gap has closed a little bit, still way too early to call, only 3% in, as the Republican Vukmir looks to upset the incumbent Democrat Tammy Baldwin. Minnesota has already been called. It looks like the incumbent Democrat will retain that seat. Again, still a couple of vulnerable Democrats that we've been discussing in Claire McCaskill in Missouri, as well as Senator Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota. Still too early to call those races. Some that have been called. It looks like in Tennessee, the Republican Blackburn has been the projected winner with 73% of precincts reporting. He's leading the Democrat Bredesen by some 20 points. Not a huge surprise there. I know Trump recently did make a trip to Tennessee. Indiana is a key race as the Republican looks to unseat the Democrat incumbent Donnelly. Let's hone in on some of the governorships right now. I know they don't have effect on the congressional races, but the governorships do have a big play, particularly as we move forward following the 2020 census, as far as which parties have control in state legislatures to redraw districting maps. So one of the closest ones we've been paying attention to is in Florida. We have 98% of precincts reporting. It looks like right now the Democratic candidate Andrew Gillum is trailing by some 80,000 votes, about 1%. That has not been called yet for the Republican DeSantis. But that if Gillum is somehow able to win and become Florida's first African American governor, that would be a huge upset. Florida, traditionally Republican, as typically as Ohio and Florida go, so does the nation.
And as always, guys, we want you to know that if you want to sign up for a free account on CryptoLiveLeak.org, please do so. You can attention mine our cryptocurrency, the CLL ERC20 token, for free. Just by signing up for an account and starting to post or read other people's posts, you start accumulating points, which you can exchange for CLL tokens. So don't forget to go over to CryptoLiveLeak.org and start attention mining CLL token today. And back to Pat on the heat map. All right, guys, let me take a shot at this. I'm not much of a politician myself. I don't really follow it. However, Pat's doing a great job of explaining the race here. It seems to me that everything is unfolding as the estimates showed. States that typically vote Republican are voting Republican. States that typically vote Democrat are voting Democrat. I just want to know what you guys think the actual results from this election. How will that impact you? How does a Democratic senator or a Democratic governor, how do you think that will impact your life? Will it be in relation to healthcare? Will it be in relation to public funding for schools? Things of this nature. When have you had a direct impact from a vote or an election? Someone personally, I don't really believe in a lot of what's going on in politics with a lot of the divide that's being caused in our country because of politics. However, it is the system we are given. It is the only system that is allowed to us at this point, democracy. It is a two-party system. However, there are some independent candidates on some of these ballots. I think Bernie Sanders is a prime example. I don't know if it was the Senate seat that he won. Was it in Vermont?
Yeah, he got reelected overwhelmingly.
So Bernie Sanders overwhelmingly got elected to the Senate seat in Vermont, and he's running as an independent candidate. So this is one of the only independent candidates, which is a third-party candidate that actually fills one of these seats that's up for election. And is this something that you'd like to see more of? More of a...
Vermont's an odd state. Vermont has two.
Yeah, so
Vermont... They have Patrick Leahy as well.
So Vermont, a little bit different. They also have Patrick Leahy, so I guess that throws a little bit of wrench in my little spiel there I was going on. But again, I just want to hear some personal stories from you viewers out there.
This isn't a Ross Perot kind of thing.
Do you think there's actual impact made from your vote? Would you like to see more independent candidates to break down this two-party system that we have? Are you conservative? Are you a Trump supporter? What is the word Trump? What kind of feelings does that bring about in you? Things like that nature. If you guys just want to throw that in the comment section, we'll be happy to answer that. And also, if you like what we're doing here today, we're throwing a little mix-up, a little curveball at you guys. Usually, we're cryptocurrency-centric only. Today, we're covering a little bit of politics. If you like this, just go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. Give this video a like. Share it around to your friends, and hop on over to the coverage. So Democrats gain House control just in. We're just watching Fox News in the background there, and we see that Democrats gain House control. So this is actually a change from what we had previous. Was it how many seats up for
so they're about every obviously House seats are elected every 2 years. Every House seat was on the ballot this midterm, all 435 of them. However, Democrats were keying in on about 80 or so vulnerable Republican districts. Of those 80, Democrats need to win 23 to retake the majority. According to Fox News, I've had Fox News on here just because I knew that they would be the last to break Democratic news. And it looks like Democrats will gain control of the House for the first time since 2010 in Obama's first term. So obviously this is significant. It's significant for a couple of reasons. First, it's significant because now Democrats are able to put a check on some of the president's legislative agenda. It's going to have things just can't get forced through by one party moving forward, at least over the next 2 years, like they did the first 2 years. And that's fairly typical. So that gives a little bit of a check on the president's agenda. So some of the big things that Republicans were looking forward to doing. So a second round of tax cuts. That's going to be very difficult. Reforming immigration to the extent that they want to militarize the border and build the wall. I think that border funding, or at least the funding for that wall, you can largely bet just got a lot more difficult for Republicans. Repealing the ACA just got and scrapping restrictions on cover, pre-existing conditions just got much more difficult and far less likely. So in basic exit polling, I think one of the most important issues, at least for Democrats, was healthcare. Healthcare was for all of your criticisms of what the ACA is, one of the things that it did do is provide insurance for the first time to millions of Americans that didn't have it. And once you have something, the last thing you typically want to do is give it up. So I think that may have increased voter turnout with all the talk of them trying to repeal the ACA. Obviously, in the first months after Trump came into office, Republicans were unable to do it. From my own personal opinion, rest in peace, Senator John McCain. You were a true maverick by going thumbs down and not trusting this president and the party at that time with your health care vote, as you were diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. So you, sir, were a maverick and a hero. Rest in peace.
We just get a comment. Best coverage of the night of the midterms.
From
Timberwolf 333.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Timberwolf 333. I appreciate your support. Yes. So moving forward, here are some key issues that I have for the Democrats. So this just breaking in. If you have not heard, Democrats have won back the House majority for the first time since 2010 in the Tea Party election in the first term of the Obama administration. It's big news just because it allows the Democrats to have a check on the president. It does make his legislative agenda much more difficult, building the border wall, stripping the ACA, as well as a second round of tax cuts just became far more difficult. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if in the weeks going forward, much to Republicans' chagrin, that you start hearing the president talk about infrastructure as a way to kind of offer a caveat to the Democrats. And that was something that was also another campaign promise that the president made. So he has, if he's been anything but consistent as far as trying to feed his base, he has openly, for both when he ran in 2016, and hopefully in the weeks going forward, may be talking about infrastructure packages. So here's a little bit. I'm very happy from a personal perspective that Democrats were able to win back the House. Here are my concerns, and I'm sure I want to hear from I really want to hear from Republicans right now. If there's any Republicans listening, please send me your questions. Tell me you disagree with me. Tell me why you disagree with me. Tell me why you're upset that Republicans don't have control of both chambers anymore and they can't force things through. Tell me why you think that the Democrats are ruining the soul of this country. Tell me everything. I want to hear it. I want us to have a strong dissertation. I want us to be able to talk back and forth and find the common ground that I know that does exist. I know that there's plenty of common ground that does exist. I know I keep going back to 2016, but while I'm on this topic, as far as the left and the right, I do want to make these points. I was a Sanders supporter. If you were a Trump supporter, I think there were a lot of things that were in common with their messages. Certainly not in their delivery, but overall in their messages. The first thing that was in common between Sanders and Trump is that both were against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. When Sanders came out against the TPP, he made Hillary do a 180 about-face about it. As far as for Trump, and both of them had similar, were very consistent as far as why they didn't like the TPP, and it was bad for the American worker. So, and it gave corporations far too much power and profit. So Sanders' points were that TPP should be scrapped. It was bad. Where Trump said, no, it's a bad deal. It's bad for the American worker. I want to rewrite a new deal. Either way, they were both against it. Another thing is both, even though Trump did bomb Syria for the use of chemical weapons, at least as a campaign promise, he's promised to not drag us into unimportant and lengthy conflicts. We'll see how that emerges forward, going forward, how that changes.
Taking us out of that Russian treaty, what happened there?
No, that's a different issue. I'm comparing Trump. Either way, I think there's still a lot of similarities. So I want to hear Republicans. I really want to hear Republicans right now. But getting back to my main point, obviously I think I'm going to switch sides because I think there's some similarities between what my concerns are for the Democratic Party moving forward and what Republicans' concerns are now that Democrats have control of the House. Things I do not want to see from the Democrats moving forward for the next 2 years. A, no more fucking investigations. None. Let Mueller finish his job. Let him conclude the report. Let's move forward. No more investigations. Do not engage in a continued circus that our president has made by pulling the same tactics. Do not continue. Don't find a way to sideshow and not get your jobs done and drum up support for your own erroneous causes or re-election bids coming in 2020, because the next election cycle starts tomorrow, people, by, creating more nonsensical House investigations. Let's get back to policy. Please, for the love of civility, do not engage on the same stage as our president is. Do not create a sideshow. Do not continue this circus. It's the reason why voter turnout is so high, whether you support or you don't support this president. Let's not continue this nonsense. Please, let's not continue this nonsense. That's my first appeal to Democrats, is don't engage in the same mudslinging and tactics. Don't drum up, different sideshow investigations because you're trying to increase your own profile for whatever office or national office you decide that you're going to run to and you're looking for campaign contributions for come 2020. I don't want to see it. I don't care about it. It's not good for our country. Let Miller finish and let's move on to policy. Second, things I don't want to see from the Democrats. We already saw Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. I do not want to see her again. Pelosi is old. She's stale. She had her chance, and she failed us as Democrats under Obama's first term by barely accomplishing health care and nothing else. Nothing else. If Democrats can take cues from anything, from as far as the progressive movement within the Democratic Party moving forward, it's that it's a rebuke of you. Largely, us voting out more moderate Democratic candidates, going for younger, new blood, more progressive ideals, is a rebuke of your leadership.
Timberwolf says,
elect someone new. The party
investigate whether there should be investigations. No,
that's funny. I don't think it's a very positive thing though, Timberwolf. So no Nancy Pelosi. Somebody else. Somebody else is Speaker of the House. Somebody that hasn't been there as long as she has. I understand. So this is also for all my Republican friends out there. This is your moment to bask in what the chaos of the Democratic Party is going to be in the next weeks and months moving forward. Because assure me, if you think the Freedom Caucus is a problem within the Republican Party, you haven't seen the progressives yet. Because it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a major, major pushback against more moderate and established Democrats. You already saw that happen at the DNC in 2016 when you had half the delegates walk out. You've seen that after the election of Trump, when there was a very, very divisive vote for who was going to be the minority whip for the Democrats, with progressives favoring Ellison from Minnesota. So it's time for new blood. Democrats, please, please, I beg you, do not elect Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. She had her time. It's time for someone new. The party needs a new direction moving forward in 2020. And if you think that it's that Democrats going forward are going to sway new voters with the same old leadership, then you're going to get your ass kicked once again come the general. And no one thought that would happen. Now, did you? Thirdly, as I talked about infrastructure earlier, I do believe that there are issues that we can work with our president on. Not everything, not many things really, but there has to be, I do believe that there are some things that we most certainly can work on.
Welcome to newcomers.
Welcome to Crypto Live Leak. Welcome everyone. My name is Pat. I'll be here with you all night. This is our midterm election coverage 2018. This is a highest voter midterm turnout in some 50 years. A lot of people voting via early ballot. Some 33 million early ballots cast according to CNN. This is big. It's highest voter turnout in 50 years. This is a referendum on our president. The president turned and made this midterm election about him and his agenda. And as Democrats have now, as it's been announced that they have taken back control of the House for the first time since 2010, there is a check on the president and his agenda. So things become a lot more difficult for President Trump and the Republicans. They become a lot more difficult for a second round of tax cuts. They become much more difficult for funding of the border wall. They become much more difficult to repeal and replace the ACA. So all of those things right now tonight are not looking good. One thing I want to hear from Republicans, if you're just joining us, I was in the middle of a diatribe of things I don't want to see from the Democrats moving forward.
This just in, comment from Timberwolf, Nancy Pelosi 2020.
So if you're just joining us, there's some things I've been talking about. Obviously, I think the Democratic Party is not united at the moment. There are factions within it, not only within the progressive wing, but obviously, given that it's election season, with a lot of more moderate Democrats in kind of more conservative-leaning districts and rural districts, trying to reflect the views and values of their constituents and not remain vulnerable. We've been paying close attention to Florida, the Florida Senate election. We've been paying close attention to both South Dakota and Missouri, as Heidi Heitkamp in South Dakota looks like she may lose her Senate seat tonight, and it's also possible that Claire McCaskill in Missouri does as well, to Republican challengers. But we were discussing Democrats winning back the House majority and things I don't want to see from Democrats moving forward. So,
going on to a quick break.
We are going to take a quick break, and then I will come back with our live coverage. Hope by that time, in the next few minutes, Florida should be called, both the senator and governor's race there. And we will come back with what should the Democrats do now that they have control of the House for the first time since 2010. What is the soul of the Democratic Party going to look like moving forward in the next congressional session? Thank you.
All right, guys, and I hope you are enjoying our coverage thoroughly here. I see that Timberwolf is really interacting with that comment section, getting our host, Patrick, getting his blood boiling with those Nancy Pelosi comments. So excellent job there, Timberwolf. We love those comments. Keep them coming. If there are any Republicans watching, we need some of your comments as well. And again, don't forget to create your user account on CryptoLiveLeak.org. It's free. You can sign up. It's a new social media platform where you can post any kind of content with any topic. Go ahead, tag keywords, make any kind of links to any YouTube videos, add a featured image, and guess what? You're going to actually earn free cryptocurrency for doing that. That's right, absolutely free. All you have to do is go ahead to CryptoLiveLeak.org, sign up for the account, start viewing posts, or make a post of your own. When anyone views your post or when you view someone else's posts, it triggers a attention mining event where both of you are rewarded CLL points, which you can then exchange for CLL ERC20 Crypto Live Leak tokens. And those tokens are actually currently trading on 3 or 4 different exchanges, I should say. That's Token Store, Fork Delta. There's a DEX aggregator called Total that it's available on. Also, another DEX aggregator called Marnock. And also Kanga.exchange. So head on over to CryptoLiveLeak.org and sign up for an account. All right, guys, let me get you back to Patrick.
You're going to take over for the next spot.
All right, looks like it's me for the next few minutes here while Patrick takes a quick break. So what I'm going to do for you here is just bounce you around on some of the graphics we have pulled up here. First, we saw that the polls are closing. We're counting down to the polls closing in Indiana, Iowa, Montana, Nevada, Utah. So Midwestern polls are closing. You're seeing we're working across America here as we have the time zone differences, so the votes are coming in. Actually, it's kind of interesting. So here's a forecast. Obviously, it's forecasting the House going to the Democrats. We already saw that Democrats have gained control of the House. What will this mean for our future? What will this mean for policies, including healthcare, including foreign policies as well? I'm going to load another graphic here. This is a real cool website. If you guys haven't seen this is realclearpolitics.com, and they have some nice heat map graphics to show you exactly what's going on. So right here we have battle for the House. Since we already think that is a foregone conclusion, let's go over to the Senate map and check out what's going on there. A lot of blue on the Senate map. That's what I'm first seeing. Blue and gray. So I think a lot of the key Senate races are still undecided. And this is something where I heard earlier that there might be a vote recount in Florida. God, we all remember that with Gore and Bush back earlier in the millennia. I mean, so we don't want that again. Should there be a more efficient system to count votes? Should the votes be on the blockchain? This is actually a question I asked my local poll officer today when voting. I said, "Sir, why aren't you on the blockchain? What's your current system for counting votes?" And he actually said they don't report live vote counting. What they do is they collect all the votes. It's almost like a Scantronic test, if you remember those back in high school or college, where you would just circle the dots to answer the questions, and then it would feed through a machine, and the machine would register what your answers were for those questions, and it would spit out a result. So they actually have like a big trash bin with a sort of a computer attached to the top lid. And that's where all the ballots feed into once they've been filled out properly, of course. If you don't fill out the circle exactly, I guess there's a possibility that your vote couldn't be counted. And maybe at the point when they're feeding it into the system, they can tell if the vote wasn't counted correctly, and they can have you refill in that circle. So anyway, the votes are tallied. They're able to determine how many votes were counted. But I don't believe there's a name on the ballot, so the ballots are nameless. They're just filled in with the circle. So this information is stored in the computer lid, and then they manually wheel the lid or take the lid over to the city hall, where all the lids from all the different precincts that have that computer component that tally the votes in them are then entered into a central federal database that then calculates the total percentage of votes for each candidate. To me, this is a lot of human intervention. This is a very inefficient system. And I asked, why don't you just count the votes live? Why isn't there a direct internet hookup to exactly when that ballot feeds into the scanner? Why isn't it then the vote goes into the database, and that way we can have an accurate count, a live count of the votes that are being tallied? And what the officer said to me was, well, we don't want to discourage certain people from voting because if they see that their candidate they favor is already up, let's say 80% to 20%, well, maybe they won't come and bother to come down to the polls and vote themselves. Well, then I ask, well, what the hell are all these projections I see on TV? They're giving me a percentage. What's the deal there? And they say that's basically generated from exit polls where there are people asking questions, who did you vote for? And that's not an official count. So people could lie on these exit polls. They could say they voted Republican when they really voted Democrat, for instance. So this would skew the data that's being showed to us as estimates. But the point is, they're still giving you that data number that could skew potential voters that haven't voted yet. So what's the point? Why don't they just have the actual number? So that's just one of the many things that I think is wrong with the current way that we are collecting vote data. Another thing is, how do we know that the scanned document we put in is actually the results that we're seeing uploaded to the federal database system? You know, it's not public information. You know, who's to say they don't just skew the votes in their direction for the candidates they want? Let's say the ones that donated the most to the corporations are the ones that corporations back the most. If you think that strings are pulled here, you know, why don't they put it on, for instance, maybe a public blockchain that has the capability of privacy features? You know, something that's sort of like a dual private public blockchain, where the vote itself is public information, but the voters' information is private. Something that comes to mind would be Tezos, where it has a governance system already built into it. Why couldn't there be a system built on top of Tezos, maybe like a DApp almost, like a layer, like an application built on top of Tezos that could utilize a governance system where, I don't know, you'd create a token, let's say a USA coin, that's a token on top of Tezos, and every citizen's given one of these coins, and to cast a vote, they have to show this coin, right? So the blockchain would prove that there's only a certain amount of coins, and once they're used, it cannot be used again. So that's one way to ensure there's no double votes, and that's one way to ensure that you know, the people that are given the coin in the first place are actually able to use that to count towards their vote. And another way, if it was loaded onto a blockchain, would be immutable. So you wouldn't have any interference. So if it was, as soon as I voted and uploaded this into the system, it went on a blockchain. There would be no way for anyone to interfere and change my vote. I don't know. Those are just some ideas I'm throwing out there. If you guys have any ideas on how to improve the current way we collect data for voting, definitely throw it in the chat. I know we have a huge cryptocurrency audience. That's obviously the name Crypto Live Leak. If you guys are just watching us for the first time, we mainly and sort of only report on cryptocurrency. We're doing something a little out of our wheelhouse here by reporting on voting and political election day today. But we're doing this because it's important to provide coverage, as much coverage as can be provided. And of course, our Chief Compliance Officer Patrick loves this stuff. This is like his Christmas. He's so hyped up about this. He can't wait to get back on the mic and keep talking to you guys. So he'll be back on in just a minute. I'm just going to go ahead and see if we can go on and load some more graphics here for you guys. So if the House is already decided, I want to focus more on the Senate and a lot of the races here. I'm seeing a lot of blue. From this screen here, I see only 3 red Republican Senate seats, I guess 1 at this point, that have the majority vote. So if you're a Republican, I guess this would be cause for concern. Democrats look like not only have they won the House, but they've gained majority control. They will of the Senate as well. So what are your thoughts? Are you a Trump supporter? Do you want to make America great again? Or are you a Democrat and absolutely repulsed by that saying? Let's see what kind of emotions that inspires in you. I want to hear your comments. I want to interact with the viewers here today. Popping on over to CNN.com. Let's just give this one a little refresh. Dems' Senate path is closing. All right. Oh, so it is closing. So that must have been a bad graphic we read earlier. So it looks like the race to 50 Senate seats, we have Republicans at 45. We have Senate at 38. We have Democrats at 38. So, well, the Dems seem to be winning the House. It looks like the Republicans are gaining control of the Senate. So that's actually pretty interesting stuff. Let's go over to their heat map here on the Senate. See if we can get a better idea. A lot of the Midwestern states tend to vote Republican. So here you go again. So 50 needed for control. We got 45 Republican. We got 38 Democrat.
Carpetbagger Mitt Romney wins the Mormon state.
And we have Utah Senate race just in. Our old friend Mitt Romney has won. Now, you guys may remember Mitt as a presidential candidate and a Massachusetts governor earlier in his career. We seem to enjoy him here. I think he also worked for was it a VC firm over here?
No, he started Staples and Bain Capital.
Yeah, Bain Capital, that's what it was. Actually, there was a few friends, acquaintances that actually worked for Bain Capital and have had nothing but positive things to say. So Mitt ran a good business in his professional life before he jumped into politics. So actually, I'm a big fan of Mitt because of that. Me personally, I'm a big fan of anyone that has real world business experience and they can take whatever they learned with those experiences into politics, because actually running a country is a lot like running a business.
No, it's not.
No, it's not, says our man of the
No,
hour
it's
here,
not.
Patrick Conlon.
No,
And maybe
it's
you
not.
can explain to us, Pat, why running a country is not like running a business. Is it because perhaps you're not exactly looking for profit, you're actually looking to help the people or help the workers, if you
No,
want to
it's
compare it
because
to a
some
company?
government programs are actually designed to run at a deficit.
So there are government programs out there that are designed to run at a deficit. And this is our tax money, of course, that fund those programs.
Correct.
So in that case, I guess I would like to see programs giving our money back to the people, which, you know, essentially gave the money there in the first place. So let me just give one more promo here to Crypto Live Leak, and then we'll get Pat back on the mic for you guys. So again, don't forget to go over to cryptoliveleak.org where you can create a user account. It's a new social media platform, very exciting. You can actually earn free cryptocurrency just by either posting or interacting with other posts. Go check it out, guys. Maybe you'll have some questions and you'll want to follow up with us later. But until then, let's get Pat back on the mic. Here he is, guys. 1 second.
Hello, Crypto Live Leak community. I'm back after a short reprieve, and it looks like we had some recent races that just got called. As Kenny was just saying, the news just came in from the Senate race in Utah, and our former governor in the former Republican primary elect, who lost to Obama twice, or lost in the Republican primary in 2008 and then lost in the general election in 2012, has now won the Senate in Utah. Some of the other more recent, it looks like that was just called, or has not been called yet, but a race that the country is paying very close attention to is the Senate race in Florida between the Republican challenger, former Governor Rick Scott, and the incumbent Nelson. With 99% of precincts reporting, it looks like Scott has a very slight edge by a little over half a percentage point. We already talked earlier, Tennessee has been called for the Republican Blackburn, as well as Indiana, flipping the incumbent Democratic seat Donnelly. That race goes to the Republican Braun. Let's take a check-in New Jersey. It looks like New Jersey was called, and the incumbent senator Bob Menendez, who was investigated on federal corruption charges, has been reelected. Corruption, nothing new to New Jersey. Other races, Senate races that we've been paying close attention to are in North Dakota between the incumbent Heidi Heitkamp and her Republican challenger Kramer. Heitkamp coming into this was very vulnerable. There was a lot of Republican money going into that election to unseat her, and she, with about 19% of precincts reporting, she is facing a 20-point deficit. Again, still early. Again, only 19% reporting, but 20 points. She was vulnerable. That it looks like that's going to be a hard one, and the Republican may win. Another very tough seat with a Democratic incumbent who's most likely to be unseated is Claire McCaskill in Missouri. Right now we have about 30% of precincts reporting, and she is getting spanked by about almost 15 percentage point.
You got a request to cover Wisconsin Scott Walker race.
All right. So now that it's about 10 o'clock, and in one moment we will switch to the governorships. Trust me, I'm paying very, very close to Wisconsin. But let's check into Texas real quick. We have about 78% of precincts reporting, and it looks like Beto O'Rourke's lead has slipped. Last time we checked in at about 70%. O'Rourke held a slight edge. It looks like that has tilted back to the incumbent Senator Ted Cruz by almost 2 percentage points, with 78% of precincts reporting. So governorships, let's switch to the gubernatorial races, shall we? So check in Florida before we get to Wisconsin. 99% of precincts reporting. It's still too early and the race has not been called, but we do see the Republican DeSantis with about a 1-point edge and about a little over 80,000 vote discrepancy over the challenger Andrew Gillum. Let's take a look at Georgia at the moment. 66% of precincts reporting. The Democrat Stacey Abrams looking to become the first female African American to represent the state of Georgia. At the moment, with 66% of precincts reporting, that does look like a long shot. The Republican Kemp, who's also the Attorney General in charge of running the elections in the state of Georgia this election cycle, that seems like a direct conflict of interest, is leading by 12 percentage points. So we will shift to Wisconsin, where Governor Scott Walker, the incumbent, is running for his third term as governor, is being challenged by the Democrat Evers. 41% of precincts reporting thus far, and the Democrat does appear to have a 5-point advantage, leading by about 55,000 votes at the moment. Now, this one is to Democrats, man, this is an important one because they have been trying to unseat Scott Walker since back in the special election of 2010. So Walker became famous because when he, outside of being kind of really being elected on that wave of Tea Party conservatism, Walker came to prominence and gained national figure due largely to his vilifying of state workers and their pensions and talking about how state workers' wages were too high. This led to an occupation of the State House for a matter of a few, where 20,000 or so people went to the Capitol at Madison and occupied the State House for a number of days. Democrats, during Obama's first term, funded a ton of money to, hold a runoff in a special election where Walker won, and he won ensuing election. He's running for his third term. Wisconsin does not have, I believe, term limits on their governorship. So this is a close one where Walker continues to run trying to win re-election for his third term as governor in the state. This would be a big one for Democrats. I know Wisconsin 2016 did vote Republican. Typically, a lot of the Midwestern states are known as purple states. Wisconsin certainly has a historically kind of progressive legacy in electing Democrats going back to the late 1960s and early 1970s. So this would be a big one. This would be a very, very good win for Democrats if Walker could be unseated. Given what Walker has already been able to do in 2 terms with regards to state workers' pensions, I don't know offhand how significant if Evers is able to win, the Democrat is able to win, how much of his policies would be reversed in a first term, given that I believe the makeup of their state legislature is still overwhelmingly Republican. But nonetheless, that would be a significant win in Wisconsin. Going back to some other Midwest states, in Minnesota, it looks like the Democratic gubernatorial candidate Waltz, about 40% of precincts reporting, is leading by some 24 points with 60% of the vote. In Michigan, 48% of precincts reporting, the Democratic candidate Whitmer is leading the Republican candidate Schutt by just by a little over 11 percentage points. Pennsylvania was called earlier. We already covered that with the incumbent Governor Wolf retaining another term. Ohio, this is a very key race. So, we've been I have at least tonight kind of some old political cliches. So Ohio and Florida go, so do the nation. That's more in respect to general elections, but I do believe that it's still very important. They're very important barometers as far as how a national electorate feels. Obviously, big win tonight for the Democrats. Democrats take back House majority for the first time since the Tea Party wave of 2010 in Obama's first term. It offers a check on our president's legislative agenda. So the Republican goals and what they were hoping to push forward, moving forward after these elections, with regards to border wall funding, their attempts to repeal and replace the ACA, as well as a second round of tax cuts, just became significantly more difficult. I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if you see in the coming weeks the Trump administration and the president particularly start to talk about infrastructure and trying to get Democrats to, or trying to kind of show his willingness to a certain extent of kind of extending a carrot to Democrats moving forward. Again, the president did talk about infrastructure funding during his presidential campaign in 2016. That's not something that Republicans typically have an appetite for, and they certainly didn't in his first term. When it was brought up, it was essentially dead on arrival. Republicans didn't want to earmark any more spending, even though Trump's last two budgets have surpassed, have exceeded $1 trillion each year, and have very much been on par with the Obama administration budgets, even more so because of the tax cuts, because there's less revenue coming in, new increased military spending. So we'll see if and how the president kind of changes his tone moving forward on infrastructure, if he offers it to Democrats as a way to kind of offer a carrot and a willingness to show that he will work with new party that can possibly just obstruct all other measures of his legislative agenda. So one of the things I was talking about earlier, we'll key into some major House races in a moment, but I want to get back to one of the key issues I think that's very important tonight. And again, if you're a Republican listening too, please, I want to hear from you. I want to hear if you're scared, if you're angry, if you're upset at the president for making this election about him, as opposed to allowing candidates to make the issues local and what they were doing. But I have a couple of thoughts on what I'm hoping to see from the Democratic Party moving forward in the coming weeks, in heading into 2019 as they take control of the House for the first time since 2010. So the first thing I outlined earlier is that let Miller conclude the Russia investigation. Just let him conclude it. I don't want to see any more investigations. Please. I do not want to see Democrats engage in the circus and in the same mudslinging tactics and in the same distraction, divide tactics that we've seen our president employ. I don't want Democrats to start digging up nonsensical, useless investigations that are just distractions to throw red meat to the base of the party, to try to inflate their own profiles moving forward into 2020 for whatever potential office they have their eyes set on, whether or not that's running for president within the Democratic primary, or trying to run for a higher seat, or whatever that may be. I don't want Democrats to create their own circus and engage in the same I don't want to see them engage in the same tactics in which we've already seen, in which largely has disaffected the American voter to a large extent. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen such high voter turnout. So I don't want to see no more investigations. No more investigations. Let Miller conclude. Let the Russia investigation come to a halt. No more special counsels. No more investigations. No, there's no need for them. It's not going to get anything done. I want the party to get to policy, whether that's obstructing bad policy you think is coming from, that you believe is coming from the Republican Party and our president, or how about putting forth good policy? How about now that you have control of the House, putting your members in the most important on the most important in the most important House committees. Now you have control of Ways and Means. I know that doesn't mean much for the Senate because you still got to get bills passed through the Senate, but as the House, you have control to set the legislative agenda. So please, set it, Democrats. Set it. Second thing I do not want to see from the Democratic Party moving forward in 2019. You're going to have the opportunity to elect a new Speaker of the House. Let me repeat that. You're going to have the opportunity to elect a new Speaker of the House. I do not, under any circumstances, want to see Nancy Pelosi elected as Speaker of the House again. She had her time. She was Speaker of the House from 2008 to 2010 under the first term of the Obama administration. And guess what? She was barely able to get health care done. So Democrats had control in the first 2 years of the Obama administration. They didn't get enough done. And Pelosi was the leader in that. Her and, Reid in the Senate as well, he shares equal as much to blame. But it is time, one thing, and this is probably for all my Republican brethren out there, here is the solace you can take from tonight, right now, what I'm about to tell you. And that is that the soul of the Democratic Party, despite their win, is incredibly fractured at the moment. What we've seen in the lead up to these midterm elections is you've seen Democrats run away from their own party, largely to save face. A lot of them in contested rural districts and more conservative districts, but you've seen Democrats make the appeal to be more conservative, more moderate, willing to work with the president. And there are some very serious issues as far as where party leaders see the Democratic Party kind of in their platform moving forward. I think to a large extent Democrats agree on what they want their platform to be. They talk about a pathway to citizenship. They talk about climate change. They talk about student debt. They talk about health care. They talk about universal early childhood education. These are things that, for the most part, Democrats agree on in their platform, but the ways in which they want to achieve it are much different. And the order, more importantly, the order as far as how they structure what's most important to their voters is vastly different depending upon who you poll. So let's not forget that in 2016 at the Democratic National Convention, more than half of the delegates walked out. Obviously, there was a very large fracture between Sanders supporters versus Hillary supporters with what happened with Wasserman Schultz, withholding voter data information from the Sanders campaign. And then following President Trump's upset in the general election in 2016, there was there was a lot of internal struggle over the vote for who was going to be the next minority leader as far as what direction the party was going to be. So the majority of your incumbent and more moderate Democrats said, okay, so we need to realign ourselves as more moderates. We need to try to appeal back to the blue-collar workers in the purple states in the Midwest, that blue-collar white workers that Trump was able to convince to vote for him in 2016, where the real energy and groundswelling of the base resided within the Sanders campaign, and it still resides to a large extent within the progressive movement. So you've seen, at least in a lot of the earlier elections, so you go back to in New York with Cortez, you look at, Beto has a possibility to win Texas as a progressive. That it would be incredible. My senator from my home state of Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. Ayanna Pressley, who's another representative from Massachusetts, congratulations to her, becoming the first African-American woman to represent the state of Massachusetts in Congress. You have, within the Democratic Party, you do have the faction of the progressive movement that appeals probably to more voters than establishment Democrats really want to acknowledge and gear up for that fight moving forward, because that's very real. It's very real, and it's going to be a challenge within the Democratic Party, particularly as you see kind of some of, where you see new blood and you see new Democratic representatives who were elected with that kind of young fervor and are hungry for it. And really, to a large extent, a lot of this does relate to ambition, as far as they're hungry to create a profile for themselves within the party and to steer the party more to the left than what maybe your more established Democrats want and what they feel is probably best moving forward into 2020. So that's very real, and that's certainly going to happen. Another thing that Republicans can take solace in tonight, you still have the Senate.
They solidified it.
You still have the Senate. So, legislation gets harder. Yeah, it does. You know what doesn't get harder, and you know what's not changed at all? You still have complete control over judicial appointments in the court. As we sit here now, I believe Justice Stephen Breyer is 78. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 84. Trump has had 2 appointments, one of which was hijacked by Mitch McConnell. It worked. You've just tipped the court for the next 30 years. You're going to continue to. President Trump has appointed more judges than any other president in the I think since maybe Reagan. So moving forward, as far as filling judicial appointments, you control the Senate. You can force that down Democrats' throats, and I guarantee you that McConnell will continue to. So Republicans can take solace in that tonight. You still control the Senate. You still control a lot of what happens. Any bill you don't like goes right back. So, and on that note, as far as how both the Senate and the House are supposed to work together, I talked about how I don't want to see Democrats starting erroneous investigations. One of the other things I largely don't want to see is I don't want to see obstruction for the sake of obstruction. I do hope that at some point we can get back to policy. Do I believe that that's going to happen? No, I'm not very hopeful. If anything, Democrats should be emboldened by tonight's election results, because them winning back the majority in the House is a direct repudiation of Trump's tactics, and to a large extent more his rhetoric than policy, but certainly some of his policy as well. Even though immigration may have riled up his base, it turned a lot of voters off, particularly in your more moderate states. So the future of the Democratic Party, we shall see. I don't think it's as unified as people want it to be. I think there's plenty of factions that exist within it. And listening to NPR today, hearing Louisiana Representative Steve Scalise kind of talk about that in anticipation of Republicans losing the House, one of the things that he felt emboldened about was that this should essentially it should unite Republicans more so, because every vote just became that much more important in the Senate and House. So one of the things that Democrats should pay very close attention to in winning back the House majority is that, okay, now as a result, at least in theory from Republican leadership, what you're hearing is that they are going to kind of rally the troops a lot more. And again, another popular cliche you've heard me say if you've been listening a few times tonight is Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. So I do believe that the Republican Party, at least in the beginning of the next congressional session, will certainly be more united in their policy objectives than the Democrats will be. I think the Democrats, to a large extent, are going to have an internal scramble as far as what they want to put, what individuals want to push forward. Not quite to the same degree as maybe the Freedom Caucus. I don't think they'll hijack it and try to shut down the government over, individual concerns. But it's whoever is elected as the new majority leader, they're going to cause them a headache. That I most certainly believe. So let's check back. We have a couple of other races that were just called. We were just looking at governor's races. 99% in Florida, still too close to call, though DeSantis has a 1% lead. Texas, Governor Abbott wins the Republican. That's not a huge surprise. New Mexico, about half the vote in. It looks like the Democrat is leading by about 9 points. In Arizona, the Republican is leading safely with 53% in by about 17. Ohio, that race is closed a little bit, with the Republican DeWine still up about 7 percentage points in almost 90% of precincts reporting. Maryland, the incumbent Republican governor, is up safely with 55% of precincts reporting, is up safely about 7.5 percentage points. And we'll check back in Wisconsin. 56% of states precincts reporting. The gap has closed between Evers and Walker. Looks to be at about 2% now. The Democratic challenger challenging incumbent Republican Governor Scott Walker, who's looking to win his third term as governor of Wisconsin. That gap is closed to 2 percentage points, with 56% of precincts reporting. Check back on some Senate races. It looks like North Dakota has been called. I've been talking about vulnerable seats, Democratic seats in the Senate. Republicans have been able to flip some Senate seats tonight. It looks like Democratic incumbent Heidi Heitkamp, who is vulnerable, has lost to the Republican challenger Kramer. We check in Missouri. Missouri has not been called yet. Only 42% of precincts reporting. But it appears that Democratic incumbent Claire McCaskill is losing significantly. She is getting creamed at the moment. She's losing by about 24 percentage points. Getting spanked. And it looks like Texas has just been called, and Ted Cruz has been reelected as your senator from Texas. Beto O'Rourke, a valiant effort, but maybe you should have spent a little less time concerning yourself with national politics and skateboarding and hanging out with celebrities and maybe appealing to your voters. Still a lot closer than I think anyone would have predicted. Texas hasn't elected a Democratic senator to Congress since 1988. That was one hell of an uphill battle for Beto O'Rourke. But one thing that he has done, just like that car ride to Washington, is he has most certainly just created himself a national profile for 2020, and he's got millions of dollars in the bank to bankroll himself for it now. So another member of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party who has eyes on 2020 and unseating President Trump and moving Democrats more to the left, becoming the party of the youth. Beto O'Rourke can set his sights on 2020 now because that's the only way he's getting to Washington. In Florida, between Nelson and former Governor Rick Scott, 99% of precincts reporting. Scott holds a slight 1.5 percentage lead over the incumbent Democrat Nelson. That was has been an incredibly close race. Both races in Florida have been incredibly close. Although I do believe that DeSantis has been elected governor. Has not quite been called yet, but it looks like he will be elected governor. Other close Senate seats, we talked earlier that Indiana flipped with a Republican winning. Not a huge surprise there. North Dakota has flipped. Heitkamp has lost. and we're still paying close up. This just in, it looks like Ohio has been projected for the incumbent governor, the incumbent Brown. Senator Brown retains his seat. And Arizona with a very, very close race for Senate between Sinema and the Republican McSally. 53% of precincts reporting. Less than 1%. It looks like we're at about half a percentage point. Less than 6,000 votes at the moment. Separate the two candidates. Other close races. Well, it looks like there's only a couple of close Senate seats remaining as we move forward into the night. So let's switch to the House. So Democrats have gained control of the House. So what districts were they able to flip? Let's take a closer look at that.
Do the promo before you get into that.
You want to do it?
Yeah, real quick. Just a half hour on. All right, guys, and we're just taking a quick break here to show you to create a Crypto Live League account. All you have to do is go over to www.cryptoliveleague.org, and you can actually start earning cryptocurrency for free through our attention mining process. Again, this is a new social media platform where you can create an account and go ahead and make a post with an image, a video, some text, and then guess what? Whenever someone views that post, you're actually going to earn CLL points, which you can then exchange for CLL ERC20 tokens, which have a real world value. You can exchange those tokens for other coins such as Bitcoin or Ethereum, and then go ahead and cash out to US dollar. So it's a really cool way for you to get paid for your attention and get paid for your time posting social media content. All right, guys, now back to Patrick as Patrick does some research, I'm just going to keep reminding you. Again, it's free to create your account at cryptoliveleague.org. And again, it's a new social media platform. So guys, let's get back to the heat map. This heat map, I can see right here, is a majority red. Look at that. That's unbelievable. This is the House, I believe, the House heat map. Now, they're already calling the House for Democrats, I believe. But to me, it looks like it's still up in the air.
It is still up in the air.
So we could have a heavy Republican day today. It could be raining red, bleeding red, whatever you want to say. I don't know why. Maybe this is because Trump inspires a lot of people's emotions and they want to go out and vote. As we said earlier, as Patrick mentioned, it is the highest voter turnout, I think, of all time. I don't know.
These are projections on California, I bet.
Oh, okay. So maybe there's projections on California, which has a lot of weight that will lean towards the Democrat side. Maybe that's why they're saying that Democrats may have the control of the House. So I don't know if you guys remember Lindsey Graham. He was the South Carolina senator that was very outspoken in the recent, I don't know if you want to call it a trial. I don't know if it was, but this was for the new justice for the...
That was Senate hearings.
Senate
confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh. So this Senator Lindsey was very outspoken. I believe he just won re-election. I don't think he's up in South Carolina.
Oh, he's not up. Okay, no. I misspoke. So he is actually commentating now on Fox News, counting down to poll, closing in 5 states. We are coming up on that now. I believe that's going to be in a few minutes at 11 p.m. We have more polls closing. So as those results come in, we're going to be sure to report those to you. And as always, we're going to offer opinions of the hosts here are not associated with Crypto Live League in any way. We are just the hosts offering our opinions, and again, no relation to the company. So if you guys if you haven't already subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. Hit that like button and hit that notification button below. We provide mostly cryptocurrency content, but every now and then we'll throw you a curveball like we are today and provide political coverage or any other coverage that may pop up. So go ahead, scroll through our video list, check out the content we've created, and we're going to get Pat back on the mic for you here shortly. Here he is now.
And I am back. Welcome back, Crypto Live Leak community, to our live midterm election coverage 2018 of the midterms. So this has been the highest voter turnout of any midterm in some 50 years. Certainly much higher than in 2014. And as our president himself has said, this has been, even though he's not on the ballot, he is most certainly on the ballot. His legislative agenda is. So I believe we spoke earlier. Fox News said the Democrats have won control of the House. They have flipped 11 seats. They need a total of 23. They still need an additional 12 seats. There are still many races that are too close to be called, or particularly as we get into the 11 o'clock hour, we are still waiting for polls and precincts on the West Coast to begin reporting. But with that being said, there are some very interesting seats that have been flipped from Republican to Democrat right now. According to NPR, we're at plus 11. And real quickly, I'm going to switch to NPR so we can hone in on a couple of these House races in which seats that Democrats have indeed flipped. So one of the first seats that Democrats were able to flip in a big state that's very important is in the state of Virginia. So what we've seen is that one of the vulnerable seats, or one of the seats that Democrats were able to win, is in Virginia's 10th district, in which the Democratic challenger Jennifer Wexton was able to defeat the incumbent Barbara Comstock. 99% of precincts reporting. That district went 55% for the Democrat, 45% for the Republican. Another seat that we're looking at, another couple real tight races. Obviously, Florida has been a key point of discussion all night. As Florida and Ohio go, so does the nation. These are great barometers to look at the national pulse. So in Florida's 26th district, we have a narrow edge in the seat that's been called with 97% of precincts reporting. We have the Democratic challenger, Debbie Powell, defeating Carlos Curbelo. In Florida's 27th district, we also have the Democratic challenger, Donna Shalala, defeating the Republican incumbent, Maria Salazar. So huge upsets there and able to flip very, very close on the margins. 51-49 in Florida's 26th, 52-46 in Florida's 27th. Very, very close. And just narrow wins for Democrats. In Pennsylvania's 7th district, it looks like there was a landslide win for the Democrat Susan Wild in upsetting Republican incumbent Marty Northstein. Only 57% of precincts in thus far, but she has an overwhelming lead of about 19 points with 58% of the vote compared to the Republicans' 39%. In New Jersey, which we touched on earlier when we were talking about the Senate race there, with Bob Menendez winning re-election despite his federal corruption charges. We have in New Jersey's 11th district, the Democratic challenger Mickey Sherrill defeating Republican incumbent Jay Weber. 81% of precincts reporting, the Democrat edging him out 56% to 43%. Another seat that's just coming in from the West Coast, somewhat West Coast, is in Colorado, with Democrats gaining an edge in the Colorado 6th district, with Democratic challenger Jason Crow upsetting Republican incumbent Mike Kaufman. 79% of precincts reporting, with the Republican incumbent having 45% of the vote and the Democratic challenger 53%. In New York, it looks like the 11th district has flipped. So there has been talk about, obviously, rural districts, which overwhelmingly voted for Trump in 2016. These were key for Democrats Obviously, their stronghold more typically is urban areas. However, in order to win back the House majority, they were going to need to flip rural districts that Trump won in 2016. It looks like in the New York 11th district, Democratic challenger Max Rose has upset Republican incumbent Dan Donovan. With 99% of precincts reporting, the Democratic challenger won with 53% of the vote to the Republicans' 47%. Minnesota's 3rd district, Republican incumbent Eric Paulson, with 98% of precincts reporting, has lost with 44% of the vote to his Democratic challenger Dean Phillips with 56% of the vote. And in Kansas's 3rd district, it looks like again 89% of precincts reporting right now. The Republican incumbent Kevin Yoder has lost to his Democratic challenger Sharice Davids. Sharice Davids with 53% of the vote to the Republican incumbent's 44%. That is the other district that Democrats have flipped. Thus far, that is the 11 districts that Democrats have won and flipped. And again, it's still early. The majority of precincts are still have not reported. As we move forward, going into the 10:45 now. Still completely waiting. Right now, it looks like Democrats are at plus 11. So we still have 191 seats in the House that have yet to be called. GOP holding the slight edge at the moment with 129 seats. Democrats with 115 seats. Early projections thus far indicate that Democrats will most likely take back control of the House of Representatives for the first time since 2010. However, they still need an additional 11 seats to do so. So we'll be paying close attention to all of those hotly contested House races moving forward. Check back on some of the gubernatorial races. We've been paying close attention to Wisconsin, where Governor Scott Walker is hoping to win a 3rd term. Incredibly close, still 60% of precincts reporting, with the Democratic challenger Tony Evers holding a slight edge of 2 points, 50% of the vote to incumbent Scott Walker's 48%. Still way too close to call. Again, we did have some upsets in some of the gubernatorial races. We had Democrats gain a seat in Michigan with their new governor, Governor Whitmer, defeating Republican incumbent Bill Schuette, 54-43. We also saw governorship switch in Illinois. With 75% of precincts reporting, it looks like the Democratic challenger J.B. Pritzker defeated Republican incumbent Bruce Rauner. Overall, Democrats weren't going to have a ton of success at governorships coming into this election. There's still the majority of states in the U.S. have Republican governors, and that stayed that way tonight. Only a couple of governorships have flipped. And again, the close ones that we were paying attention to and still are in Ohio and Florida. Florida has still not been called yet between the Republican Ron DeSantis and the Democratic challenger Andrew Gillum. 99% of precincts reporting, 50% edge to DeSantis, 49% to Gillum. Who knows? That if that's going to end up having to go to a recount or a runoff, they'll be counting the ballots late into the night in Florida. We've also been paying very close attention to Ohio, where with 88% of precincts reporting, it looks like the Republican Mike DeWine is leading by 7 percentage points over his Democratic challenger Richard Cordray. In Georgia, 67% of precincts reporting. It looks like Attorney General Brian Kemp will become the new governor of Georgia over Democratic challenger Stacey Abrams. In South Carolina, Henry McMaster wins the governorship. Vermont stays Republican. Not a ton of other tight gubernatorial races at the moment outside of the ones that have been outlined. Colorado is fairly close with 70% of precincts reporting. It looks like the Democrat Jared Polis has a slight edge over Republican challenger Walker Stapleton by about 6 percentage points. In South Dakota, South Dakota's close for their governorship. It looks like Republican with 66% of precincts reporting. We have Republican Kristi Noem with a slight edge over Democratic challenger Billy Sutton. And that is the Republican 51 to the Democrat 48. Early reporting out of Iowa. Their polls just closed at 10 o'clock, about 12% of precincts reporting. The Democrat Fred Hubel is leading by about 10 percentage points over Republican Kim Reynolds, 54 to 44. And let's check back. And again, if you guys have any questions whatsoever that you'd like to ask me, anything that you disagree with that I've said tonight, anything you want to go back at me on, again, if I'm hoping there's some Republicans listening, I'd love for you to engage me right now. If you're a Democrat and you support what I'm saying or you take issue with what I'm saying, anything, again, if you have any questions, how about ballot initiatives? That's one thing that I want to kind of switch and we'll pivot to an extent as we move forward into the night, as a lot of these races begin to get called and we wait for some of the precinct reporting to begin on the West Coast. Well, I'm looking, I want to find, because I know that there was a couple of ballot initiatives regarding legalization of marijuana.
Okay.
That I'd like to get into.
You want
So just
to look for them? And
yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah, why don't you take it?
All right, guys, gonna give a quick promo here. So again, Pat is doing some research right now on some ballot initiatives. He's gonna come back very soon with those important initiatives, some of them involving legalization or decriminalization of marijuana. We know Massachusetts, the state we live in, I think in 2016 made 2014 was the recreational marijuana, and I think was it 2016 was the 2014 was the medical, 2016 was recreational.
2010 was medical.
So it obviously takes a long
2008
time.
was decrim, 2010 was medical, 2012 was legalization. Because legalization in Mass was supposed, or maybe it was 24, maybe it was, no, it was a general, maybe it was 20.
So as you can tell, a lot of these initiatives, it takes time for them to actually take hold, take effect in the communities, to see a result from your yes or no that you're voting. I know in Massachusetts there was a big initiative for nurses. It was question 1, whether or not nurses should have a cap on the amount of patients they're assigned. I know that we have a nursing friend who may even be watching here. If you are, shout out. Shout out to the Nutters. Maybe they're watching. Allie and, of course, Jim. And I think there was a yes on number 1, which she wanted, which was, I'm not sure exactly, maybe it was to keep the amount of patients to a minimum or to a cap. That way they can provide a level of quality of service that is acceptable. Now, if any of you guys listening want to make a post, want to share your opinion, you don't want to make a comment. Maybe you want to earn some money or some cryptocurrency for your time making that post. Well, instead of doing it on Facebook, instead of doing it on Twitter, instead of doing it on Instagram, why don't you hop on over to cryptoliveleak.org and get rewarded for your attention on social media. Make your post on cryptoliveleak.org and start attention mining CLL. Anytime someone views your post, reads your comment or interacts with your content, guess what? You're rewarded CLL points, which you can turn into CLL ERC20 tokens, which can then be exchanged for other cryptocurrencies. These have real-world value, folks. You can make money for free online, and I'm telling you how. Will you take advantage? It's up to you. All right, let's get back over to Pat and his detailed research on some of these questions here that could be of your concern. Here he is.
So with state ballot elections also come one of the more important as far as state and statewide ballot initiatives and proposed ballot questions. So ballot questions are gathered differently in every state, but typically what happens is you have a political organization that's motivated largely by their own goals to an extent, not always necessarily industry driven, but largely due to legislative inaction. And they go out and they collect the necessary signatures necessary within different areas of the state to put forth a ballot initiative directly to the voters. One of the things that's great about ballot initiatives is that there's very few instances in which they can be repealed. When you put things to a direct vote to the constituents, how are your representatives supposed to get reelected if they come out against how their constituents voted in the first place? So there's a couple of there's always a lot of very interesting ballot initiatives that are, and very important ones, I feel, that always come about. Some of the more important ones tend to come about during general elections when you see higher voter turnout. However, they're nonetheless important in a midterm. They're always very, very important. So I want to take a look at some of the marijuana ballot initiatives. More than half the country, in some way, shape, or form, has either decriminalization, medical, or legal marijuana. I believe there's now currently 9 states that have legalized recreational marijuana, or legalized, maybe not full rec. 4 states, maybe 4 or 5 states full rec, but more medicinal. But one such state that is voting on the legalization of recreational marijuana is Michigan. Still early in Michigan, with about 40% of precincts reporting that looks like it may pass overwhelmingly. With a yes margin of 58% to a no margin of 42%. In Utah, they're in a ballot initiative looking to expand the medicinal marijuana law. It looks like the margins are a little bit tighter there, but with 42% of precincts reporting, 56% of people are for expanding the medicinal marijuana law, with 44% against. Very interesting that kind of sparks to me, or piques my interest, given the majority of there have been polls taken, the majority of Americans nationwide support the legalization of marijuana. I think it's slightly over 50%. However, in North Dakota, in a ballot initiative seeking to decriminalize marijuana, with 79% of precincts reporting, 61% of the vote is a no, with only 39% of the vote a yes. So that's certainly interesting, where North Dakota seems to be against national trends. Now, there might be a variety of reasons for that. North Dakota, a very large state, not typically a large one population-wise. I'm not sure what their demographics are as far as median age. Given the overwhelming majority voting no, I would guess they probably have a little older of a generation as far as their demographics. So that's certainly interesting. This is another thing for all my Republican friends that I once again find incredibly interesting. This is not the first time that this has happened. We saw this happen across multiple states in the last midterm election. And that's one thing I just can't seem to understand, where it seems like it's a case where people vote for representatives who do not hold their constituents' interest. And in speaking of this, I'm of course talking about increases in the minimum wage. So in both Arkansas and Missouri, in Arkansas only 47% of precincts reporting, but in a statewide ballot asking their constituents if they are for an increase in the minimum wage, 68% have voted yes to 32% voting no. Where also in Missouri, 52% of precincts reporting a raise in the minimum wage, 61% vote yes, 39% vote no. Now, Arkansas I find very interesting, obviously, because of Benton being the hometown of Walmart, the largest corporation in the world. But Arkansas and Missouri, traditionally Republican states. So you vote for Republicans who don't believe in an increase in the federal minimum wage, and yet vote on ballot initiatives to increase your state minimum wage. It's just one of those instances where it seems like constituents, to an extent, vote against their interests. So that's a little perplexing. I do find that very interesting. We all need a pay raise. Some of the other ballot initiatives, no surprise, some of them are, let's see, taking a quick look at some of the more interesting ones. Nebraska with 46%. This is a healthcare ballot initiative. Nebraska is voting to expand state Medicare. 55% for, with 45% against, with 46% of precincts reporting. In Utah, they are also voting to expand their Medicaid law. With 41% of precincts reporting, you have 57% yes, 43% no. And in Idaho, still too early because polls haven't closed, they also have a state ballot initiative to expand their state Medicaid program. And if Idahoans vote for that, that would make a clean sweep. Colorado, this is an interesting one. Particularly, there's been national news as far as prison riots and what prisoners' rights really are regarding work programs. It's a fairly controversial topic. I understand the arguments on both sides. Truthfully, if you violate the rights of society, there's a reason why you're in jail in the first place. But I do understand the concepts of a basic working wage. You can't just pay them nothing. There has to be some kind of earning to at least maybe pay down, some of the debts that they incurred, or that they can earn back in paying for the laws of society in which they violated. But in Colorado, there's a law to basically outlaw non-paid prison labor, and it looks like that is going to a yes vote overwhelmingly, with 70% of precincts reporting. We have 65% in favor of prohibition and 35% voting no. Florida, not like the rest of us. This is interesting. So, a lot of people, or traditionally, I'm not sure if this was fairly recent, or not. But as far as felons losing their right to vote, convicted felons, there's a ballot initiative for criminal justice reform in the state of Florida, in which members overwhelmingly voted to restore felon voting rights. So, bravo, Florida. And at the same time that Florida voted to restore felon voting rights, the great state of Louisiana voted to prohibit felons from running for public office, overwhelmingly. In the state of Ohio, obviously one of the national, particularly, all over the country, Massachusetts, in the Northeast, we've certainly felt it here with the opioid crisis and opioid epidemic. There was a ballot initiative in the state of Ohio that sought to reduce drug crime penalties, with 92% of precincts reporting that was shut down overwhelmingly, 64% of voters rejecting that ballot initiative to only 36% of voters voting yes. And those are just some of the ballot initiatives that states are voting on. If you have any interesting ones, not all of the state ballot initiatives are listed on npr.org. If you have any state ballot initiatives that you would like to discuss, or any questions about any other state ballot initiatives that we have not discussed here, please shoot us a message as we continue to bring you live coverage of the midterm elections 2018 here at cryptoliveleak.org. So we're going to come back and take a look at some of the House races as we get into the 11 o'clock hour. And more districts and more races are being called. Dems have added an additional 4 seats since the last time that we reported on concluding House races as we wait for precincts to report. It looks like in Illinois, the Illinois 14th District, Democratic challenger Lauren Underwood has defeated Republican incumbent Randy Holtgren by a total of 52 to 48. We also have in Illinois 6th District, Democratic challenger Sean Casten defeating Republican incumbent Peter Roskam 53 to 47. We already covered both races in Virginia. All right, and as we get into the 11 o'clock hour here at Crypto Live Leak, we've been going for about 2.5 hours now. Some of the West Coast precincts are beginning to report in California, Washington, and Nevada and Oregon. Some of the more interesting ones are in Iowa and Nevada. We're going to slow it down and begin to wrap it up. We've had a lot of great, exciting coverage here. Again, Democrats haven't won back the House yet. They are projected to. They have thus far gained 15 seats. They need to gain an additional 8 for 23 in order to come back. This just in, as we break in our Senate coverage, it looks like Missouri Democratic incumbent Claire McCaskill has lost her Republican challenger, Josh Hawley. So that makes the second female Democratic senator who is vulnerable in Republican states to lose. In North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp was also spanked by her Republican opponent. In other Senate races, Ted Cruz narrowly holds on, defeating Democratic challenger Beto O'Rourke. Valiant effort, Beto. You've laid the groundwork for 2020, and you got plenty of money to do it. You were going, Texas hasn't elected a Democrat from the Senate to Congress since 1988. Not in my lifetime, not in some others. Man, you blew that opportunity, Beto. Damn, you blew that opportunity. In Florida, former Governor Rick Scott becomes a new Florida senator, defeating the incumbent Democrat. Some other hotly contested Senate seats were in Indiana, where the Republican challenger Mike Braun defeated Democratic incumbent Joe Donnelly. We also saw where was Ohio? Ohio didn't flip. That was we saw a lot of incumbents win. Only a couple of seats have flipped in the Senate thus far, and both of those were vulnerable female Democratic senators. Senator Heidi Heitkamp from North Dakota, as well as Senator Claire McCaskill from Missouri, and as well as in the state of Indiana, the Republican challenger Mike Braun has defeated Democratic incumbent Joe Donnelly. It appears that we may very well have a runoff election in the state of Mississippi. 73% of precincts reporting, with Democrat Mike Espy leading by 2 points over Republican challenger Cindy Hyde-Smith. To go back to some of the governor's races, again, Florida, Rick Scott wins in Florida. For our governor's races, in Florida, still has not been called yet, but it looks like Ron DeSantis has a narrow lead over Andrew Gillum. The state of Illinois flips blue with Democrat J.B. Pritzker upsetting incumbent Bruce Rauner. In New Mexico, Democrat challenger Michelle Grisham has undefeated Republican Steve Pearce. In Michigan, Democratic Gretchen Whitmer has upset incumbent Republican Governor Bill Schuette. So Democrats outside of the House able to flip a couple of governorships. However, they were not able to flip any seats in the Senate. And the focus still continues on the House as Democrats need an additional 8 seats. We will most likely know by morning. I know all projections, including from Fox News, are that Democrats have taken back the House for the first time since 2010. My name is Patrick Conlon here from Crypto Live Leak. I hope you enjoyed our live coverage and our live streaming on YouTube of midterm elections 2018. Hello again, my name is Patrick Conlon here from CryptoLiveLeak.org. I hope you enjoyed our coverage of midterm elections 2018. We've been here for over 2.5 hours. Please follow us on our website, CryptoLiveLeak.org. Again, we're taking a brief reprieve from what we normally do, which is cryptocurrency news and media, everything crypto, including not only our website, which please sign up, create your own free account, and start attention mining our ERC20 token, the Crypto Live Leak token, which can be traded on exchanges. We are listed on 5 currently, including our newest listing on the Kanga exchange. We do airdrop. We're giving away airdrops and do different promotions quite frequently. Please follow us. It is an open cryptocurrency blog. So thank you for taking time out of your day to follow us here for midterm election coverage 2018. Business and governments all intersect, and it will be interesting to see how and if regulations concerning cryptocurrency markets change in the months and years going forward. Follow us, cryptoliveleak.org, and on Twitter at PatrickConlin8. Thank you. Signing off.